The night is late, and I'm growing weary. The past few weeks I've heard howling in the late night hours. I've watched as livestock goes missing or is found torn open. There are rumors spreading and fear that is growing among townsfolk. So I walk now, hunting, searching for whatever is doing the killing. Now, however, the matter is of more important sort. You see, last night we found little Beth Sanders with her face eaten off, her body torn open and in the middle of a street. The poor girl was just taking out the trash when she was attacked. The parents came running naturally, but they said in the few seconds it took to hear her screams and the howling, they'd opened the front door in time to see their little girl screaming and being dragged into the darkness. She was only 11 years old, and the fear in the eyes she had left said it all. My name is Job Anderson. I'm a local hunter here in Michigan. I volunteered to hunt this monster that killed Beth and many of the livestock around these parts. In my search for this thing, I found evidence that suggests that it lives in the woods. I imagine Beth was only partially devoured because of all the ruckus from the town when she went screaming into the darkness. This is all speculation, but since this thing started harassing the town, our livestock numbers have drastically dwindled. I don't know if it attacked Beth because she happened to be there or it did so out of necessity for food, but it was vicious. Local authorities are keeping an eye out on things tonight as well, but none of them have come out to join my hunt just yet. Walking the path where Beth was dragged and ultimately found, I could still see bits of blood in the street that eventually lead off towards the woods. The further I head in, however, the less evidence I find of any sort of animal at all. I spend an hour out here before I finally find some prints in the snow. They look like a dog or a wolf's foot, but they appear to be headed back into town, and they look fresh. That's when I hear the sound of gunfire and screaming in the distance. Quickly, I turn around and head back to town. By the time I reach the town, however, there's blood all over the street and sheriff's vehicles abandoned in the roadways. Quickly, I follow the trail of blood into the darkened alleys of a small town. It isn't long before I came upon the body of an already dead sheriff, their insides ripped open and torn through. It was Sheriff Williams, a man who'd been with the sheriff's office for 22 years. His body was ripped in half, a look of horror on his dead face. Jesus, I thought to myself, what the heck could have done this? Gunfire rang out farther ahead and I rushed forward until I heard a growling, then a howling, followed by a woman's screams. I arrived in time to see blood, which went up to a bank, before going up and headed back down into the main street to find bodies everywhere. Gun shells were just as numerous. There was blood and organs all over the street. There were women and men in sheriff's uniforms strewn everywhere. I was in shock and terror at this point, as I gazed at the side of one of the vehicles and saw bloody claw marks torn into the side of the vehicle. What the hell had done this, and why? I thought to myself. It didn't make any sense. First, it was livestock, but now, it seemed like it was hunting people. Whatever it was, he had a thirst for carnage. These past weeks had been terrifying, but this was on a whole new level. The sheriff's office was all we had around here. We weren't a big town. There was no reason for any other sort of law enforcement, and most everyday police in towns are a ways away. It seems now, however, that our law enforcement might be gone for good. I heard a door open, and Richard, one of the locals, came out asking me the only question that made sense. What the hell happened? Those were the words he spoke, and I didn't really have much of an answer. I informed him to go inside, half in a state of shock myself, as I said this. I then stood and waited. It was quiet for the next few hours, and I imagine most of the folks were afraid to leave their homes. I couldn't blame them either. I waited till the sun rose again before going around, door to door, trying to get everyone to meet at the local church. Something needed to be done, and it seemed we were alone now in trying to take care of the situation. I would need help, and there was no way I felt comfortable taking this damn thing on alone. Once we had the locals in the church, I had Jimmy lock and bar all the doors. This was unsettling to the townfolk, but I needed their attention, and I didn't want to chance that thing trying to come for us. I motioned for everyone to quiet down, then I addressed them all as best as I could. Listen up, folks. I understand y'all are scared, and rightfully so. I understand you have a lot of questions, and I simply do not have most of those answers. Before we get too deep into this conversation, I want to get something out of the way. First, we are going to need all the women with children to leave the town before tonight. Pack light and keep your phones close. We will inform you when it's safe to return. A large uproar rang out, but once it died down, I continued speaking. If you're a woman, you have no child, and you have the ability to hunt, I'd like you to join me. The same goes for any and every man with a gun who is capable and willing to help me hunt this bastard down. I'm not sure what's out there, but it's very capable of killing. It started small and with our livestock, but quickly turned to our townsfolk. I believe the entire sheriff department is dead, so that makes us the only defense for our town. There was a hushed silence now as I continued to speak. I won't force you to join me in my hunt, but I'd like you to join me if you can. We need to end the threat to this town, right freaking now. If you are afraid or would rather join your families, I fully understand. I do urge you, however, to think about your town, those who've already fallen, and the possibility that this thing could go and terrorize other families in other towns. Think long and hard on that before making your decision, but those willing to stay and hunt with me, please remain here in the church. The rest of you, I wish you safe travels, and I pray that you can have a safe return soon. There was more silence as we unlocked and unbarred the doors. A few minutes went by before most of the women and children went home, loaded up their stuff, and began leaving the town. Ultimately, there remained 9 of us in the church, 7 men and 2 women. That was all that would be staying behind. I didn't blame those that left, and I thought this would probably be a good thing, as there would be fewer fatalities this way. I didn't waste any time before speaking to the remaining group. Alright, listen up. First, I'd like to say thank you to all of you. I know a lot is happening fast, but we need to keep our focus. We have to kill whatever the hell is out there murdering us. I'm thinking we stock up on ammunition and weapons from a local gun shop in the sheriff's office to bolster what we already have between us. Next, we need to take what's left of our livestock and use it as bait. I'd like to strategically place it so the thing has to move in a specific direction, leading it to the old bank. We can split up into 2 teams of 4 at that point and wait for the thing. The moment you see it coming for the livestock, you have a shot, fire on it. I'm hoping we can kill it in an ambush, but be wary. This thing killed our entire sheriff's department. They had plenty of ammunition. If this thing somehow makes it to the bank, I'll have something rigged to hopefully end the thing once and for all. We'll communicate via walkie-talkie, 1 for each of us. Stay safe out there, my friends, and we'll begin dividing teams now. Jack, Jimmy, Leanne, and August will make Team 1. Y'all will wait up at the farm for the initial assault. Once the beast nestles into feeding on livestock, fire upon it. Only do so from hidden stands near the woods. You should be able to see the farm with the scope from your rifles. Once you've got the beast's attention, let out a deer call and Team 2 will come out with a distraction. Team 2 will consist of Thomas, Darnell, Bob, and Nathan. As soon as you hear the signal, I want y'all to turn on the sirens in a couple of the sheriff trucks you'll be waiting in, halfway between the farm and the post office. I'll make sure to keep a good distance from the thing once it gives us a chase. I want you to lead the beast into town and near the bank where I'll have the trap waiting. As soon as you hit the street, just past the bank, I want you to shut off your sirens and lights and veer off into the opposite directions down the street. You're to circle back up and pick up Team 1 and regroup at the church till further notice. Everyone seemed to understand the instruction given, but there were a few questions about what I was planning to do once the creature reached the bank. I informed them I'd have a few barrels of flammable and explosive material waiting in the center of the street, outside the bank. Once the creature got close by chasing Team 2, I'd fire around into the barrels and hopefully light the monster up like Christmas. After explaining all of this, everyone spent the rest of the day prepping to take this thing down. I wasn't sure if this would work, but it was the best plan I had at the moment. In truth, I was hoping Phase 1 of the plan would be enough to take the beast down, but only time would tell. It did take long for night to fall upon us again. I was exhausted and weary from not sleeping the night prior. I waited on the top floor of the bank, reflecting on what had happened the night before. I pondered what I would do if this plan failed, what I would do if anyone died as a result of it. I planned on killing this thing one way or the other, so I suppose if the plan falls through, I probably would be alive to worry about the end result. It was about 10 when I heard the sound of gunfire in the distance. Team 1 had made contact, and after a minute or so, we heard the deer call over the radio. Sirens rang out as I heard Team 2's police SUVs heading in my direction. I checked in with Team 1, who said they were waiting for Team 2 to circle around when I heard a loud screaming over the radio. There was gunfire, and this was soon followed by the sight of the sheriff's SUV running straight into the barrels I laid out. There was a loud explosion and fire roared as I heard another SUV crash. There's no way, I thought. I quickly fired around to distract the beast while I rushed downstairs and tried to get into the street. To my horror, I saw a creature with eyes that looked red in the darkness. It was quite tall and stood on 2 legs. It was quite muscular, but still slim and had a dog's head. It couldn't be, I thought to myself. In the creature's teeth was Bob. He looked mortified as the thing's teeth sank into his stomach and ripped him in half. There was blood, and there was screams as the thing devoured most of Bob in seconds. Thomas kicked out the door of his SUV screaming and on fire from the explosive barrels. He was panicking and talking about how Darnell was dead before falling over and continuing to burn. I moved to help him, but it was clear it was already too late. I fired a few shots from my rifle off into the beast, but it only seemed to piss the thing off. I quickly ran into and locked the bank down. I soon barricaded myself as I heard a loud growling and felt the beast trying to break inside. Then I heard the sound of more gunfire. That could only be Nathan, I thought to myself. I quickly jumped onto the radio and told Nathan to get the hell out of there, get back to the church. I'd handle this thing on my own, or I'd die trying. I didn't want any more blood on my hands. I'm not sure what went wrong, but I'm guessing this thing caught up to the SUV at some point. I quickly ran upstairs and looked at all I had. I then heard a loud howl, followed by the sound of screaming. Looking out the window, I saw Nathan crawling across the road, missing a leg. This beast quickly finished him by burying its teeth into its spine and ripping it from his body in one quick bite. I was in shock and horrified at how quickly everything went wrong. I fired a few more shots at the beast while leaning out the window. There was a growling and a loud howl before I saw it run off. Silence fell over the town for a moment until finally my walkie-talkie crackled to life. Jack was on the other line. "This is on you," is all he said before going silent. I didn't argue. I couldn't possibly argue. He was right. It was completely on me. An hour went by in silence before I decided it might be safe to go back to the church. Once I arrived, with the guns and ammunition I had left on hand, I shut the place down and barricaded it. Sullenly, I walked towards Jack, Jimmy, Leanne, and August, and apologized to them before heading into the pastor's office and getting some sleep. No one confronted me about it after that. I awoke the next morning to find Jack gone. Jimmy informed me Jack decided to leave town. I couldn't blame him. After hearing what he heard, that being said, I'd seen it, and there was no way I could let something like that live. I looked around at Jimmy, Leanne, and August. The mood was heavy in the room, but I informed them if they felt like going, they could as well. Jimmy put a hand on my shoulder and laughed. He spoke about how he'd lived here his whole life. He was raised here, and he wasn't going to give up his home so easily. Leanne and August seemed pretty set on sticking around as well. It was nice to have the support, but after last night, I had no plan. I wasn't sure how I was going to kill this thing or have a chance at all against it. What could we possibly do against a predator like that? I'd never seen anything so vicious or so terrifying in all of my life. Leanne could see I was in a complete haze when she suggested complete suicide. She said we should hunt the thing down in the woods, take the fight to its home. I laughed at this. I was probably losing it to some degree, but I wasn't that crazy just yet. You got a plan to go with that suggestion? Leanne shot me a look that pretty much said I was being an asshole. She wasn't wrong either. I didn't want any more blood on my hands. I tried a plan. I thought it was a good plan, and was well executed, except it wasn't, and it failed. We lost 4 people to my foolish underestimation of this creature. I'm sorry for being a dick, Leanne. Here's the thing, though. You didn't watch Bob's horrified expression as he was ripped in two and devoured in seconds. Jack was right. That's on me. You didn't see Nathan crawling for dear life across the street before having his spine ripped up from his body. It's all on me. I underestimated this thing and failed us. I felt Jimmy's hand on my shoulder again. He told me it was okay. He said at least I had a plan at the time. He reminded me how everyone who stayed behind had volunteered of their own volition, and for the love they had for their hometown. I couldn't believe it. In some ways, I almost swore Jimmy was naive or insane to want to stay here and fight the thing. Then again, some part of his faith and confidence helped me recollect myself. I let out a huge sigh and began thinking. Well, if we're going to do this, we'll need all the guns we can carry. I shot that thing and I'm sure I hit it more than once, and it only seemed to piss it off. We also need food and supplies in case we're out there for a while. Let's eat, we'll load up, and head out as soon as possible. I don't know if this thing comes out during the day, but I'd like to get a head start before it's dark out. It was with that we ate, packed all the guns and ammunition we could stand to carry, along with some supplies, and we headed for the woods themselves. I was pretty sure this was suicide. I thought it was likely that we'd never be heard from again, and whatever happened at the town would be a mystery to the world. Maybe it would end like that. Regardless, I felt we had no choice but to push forward, even if it meant we died. Hopefully, we'd kill the hellish beast in the process. We set off, and much of the day was spent looking for any sign of the beast. It was cold out and the woods were quiet. Some part of me wished we never found the beast, and it simply never returned to town again. Maybe it'd be wiser if we all just abandoned town, but then, the sensible half, if you want to call it that of me, said this thing needed to die. It'd just come back and torment anyone who might live in the town again, or even those in neighboring towns. It wasn't long before I heard Leanne call from ahead, the group to rejoin her. Upon our arrival, we found a deer laying there in pieces. It was mostly just the head and a leg or two that remained. There was also a piece of the organs and a ton of blood in the area. Looking further, we found dried and bloody claw marks. The beast had been there for sure. How long ago was hard to tell, but it wasn't immediately recent. There were some tracks in the ground and a trail of blood, but all these things faded over time. It wasn't long before night fell upon us and we decided to camp out, but keep a watch. The first watch would consist of August and Jimmy, while the second watch would consist of myself and Leanne. Exhausted from the stress and trek through the woods, I passed out quickly. I'm not sure what time it is now, but I've awoken to the sound of gunshots and screaming. Upon leaving the tent, I see Leanne, gun in the air, shaking. She tells me she fired upon the monstrosity. She mentioned how the thing came from the darkness and grabbed Jimmy before he could react. Even now, we can still hear his screams. Leanne starts to run forwards, but I tell her to wait. We need to travel together. It's not much safer, but it's the safest we'll be hunting this thing. August and Leanne nod in agreement, and we grab our gear and rush in the direction of Jimmy's screams. As we get closer, his screams get more agonizing. I'm beginning to wonder if the thing is using him to lead us deeper into the woods. It almost seems sadistic at times in its methods. I put the thought out of mind as we pick up speed and push through the trees and brush. The minutes grow longer and the night grows colder. The longer we give pursuit, the more I feel like we're already too late. I try not to give in to such thoughts, but it's becoming harder not to now. Everyone keeps dying, I think to myself. Just as I began to shake myself from the mindset, we came upon a clearing. Jimmy is coughing up blood. He's been torn open and is trying to say something through gurgled breath. I lean in closer, and as I do, I hear him say, "It's a trap," and I look up and shout to be ready, but as I do, I hear a crunch from behind us. Turning around, there's a stump where August's head used to be. A geyser of blood is spouting from it. Standing before us is a monstrosity, and seeing it in full view now, I realize what it is. I couldn't be 100% sure in the shadows from before, but now I was positive. This was the Dogman of Michigan. Part of me didn't want to believe it, but it matched the description of the legends and other sightings to the slightest detail. I was left in shock and dismay before I'd recollected myself and fired at the beast. It howled out before crunching August's head, completely between its teeth, and darting in my direction. I fired off another round, and saw the bullets enter the beast, which knocked me off my feet and into a tree. The beast is on me before I even fully hit the ground, but then lets out an angry howl as it feels buckshot in its head. Turning, it leaps on a shocked Leanne who stabs it in the face a few times, while I scrambled up and fire a few more times on the beast myself. It quickly grabs Leanne and hurls her at me. I feel Leanne hit me, and then both of us hit a tree, but upon looking up, I notice the beast is gone. "Are you okay, Leanne?" She nods in pain as we both slowly stand up. I look around, shaking in fear as I reload my shotgun, and walk in the direction I saw the Dogman run. I can't believe this thing is real. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I'd never believed it was real. It killed so many of my friends and destroyed so much of my hometown. The thing needed to die. The rest of the night we spent trying to pursue our prey, but we never found it. By daybreak, we tired and wanted to sleep, but to sleep probably meant death at this point. Stopping, we decided to eat and keep watch together. Watching her closely, I could tell Leanne was having the same thoughts I was about this whole situation. Maybe we shouldn't have kept pursuing the Dogman. Maybe we should turn and head home. "You can go home, or leave completely if you need to." Leanne looked at me with a look that suggested she was half thinking about it before thinking and shaking her head no, and telling me we needed to kill this thing. We both stood up and put the fire out at our makeshift camp, before continuing our search of signs for the nemesis in the woods. Eventually, we did find something. Claw marks in the trees that seemed to lead straight ahead. Wary, it could be another trap. I told Leanne to be careful as we proceeded. Eventually, we reached a cave. Could this be it? Could this be the beast's lair? Slowly I approached, motioning for Leanne to wait, but to be ready. Stepping inside the cave, I see bones everywhere. Some were animals, others appeared to be human in form. Moving deeper, I found an empty dead end. There were still bones, so perhaps this was the thing's lair. But if it was, it wasn't here presently. The sound of gunfire rang out behind me as I heard Leanne cussing at something and calling out my name. I rushed out to see nothing, but Leanne. What'd you see?" She informed me she saw the beast, but it quickly darted away when she fired at it. Realizing we were in the right place, I told Leanne that we should move away and wait until nightfall. So, the remainder of the day we waited and prepared. I thought to myself about how things would end. They needed to end tonight. We were running low on supplies, and I was not quite sure if this Dogman was going to let us just waltz out of the woods and go back to town to resupply. Hell, at this point the town could be in the news already. If anyone passed through it, got a sight of the devastation, they'd likely have called someone. Maybe we should have done that ourselves, but I didn't want any more dead on my conscience. The sun began to set, and as it did, I looked at Leanne closely. She didn't need to die, I thought to myself as I twirled something in my coat pocket. I then stood up, loaded my gun, and headed in the direction of the cave. I could hear Leanne asking me where I was going, but I kept walking. It was sunset when I approached the cave. I fired a few shots inside to get the attention of the creature. It didn't take long for the glowing red eyes to appear, and soon after the beast stood before me growling. "You die tonight, you son of a bitch." I charged forward, firing every bullet I had in my shotgun. The thing was angry, and was about to jump on me when I heard a bullet whiz by and strike it. "Leave, Leanne, go now!" She kept firing, and the Dogman howled before rushing her. I gave chase, pulled out my knife, and leaped on the creature's back, stabbing it several times, and felt the monster howl as a few more shots landed in the beast from Leanne. "Leave, Leanne, I'm going to end this," I said as I pulled out and waved a stick of dynamite. I had kept as long as a last-ditch effort. I didn't see Leanne's expression, but I did hear her shouting something to the effect of my being crazy. There may have been something about not doing it, but I didn't hear it as I stabbed again and again into the backside of the creature until I was thrown off and sure I had its attention. I lost my knife, but I still had my lighter as I slowly backed into the cave and lit the stick of dynamite. I watched as the creature rushed towards me. I still couldn't believe it, or any of this was real. I could feel the creature bury its teeth into me. I could feel the life draining from my body. I felt the warmth of my own blood and found it to be oddly relaxing. Then everything disappeared in a loud bang and bright flash of light.
The cave had collapsed that night, shortly after the explosion. I wasn't sure if the monster we fought was really dead, but as I arrived back in the town, the news crews were already there. Search parties had apparently been sent out to find us. There were many questions to which I wasn't sure how to answer. The town is back to normal. Most of the townfolk moved back in. We haven't seen anything strange since. I'm not sure if that thing is dead, or if there are more of them out there. But some nights I could still hear a howling in the distance on nights like that, and I don't sleep those nights.
I'm awoken in the middle of the night to the sound of thumping and my dog Benjamin barking up a storm. Slowly getting up, I can hear my bones creaking. Age does that to anyone. Walking past a mirror, I stop to look at myself for a second and realize the years haven't been kind to me. "Come on, Sawyer," I tell myself. "Keep it moving." As I walk out into the living room of my cabin, I listen closely, Benjamin tailing close behind me. It's quiet now, save for the sound of the cold, snowy winds outside. I take a peek outside my window and see nothing, though I'll admit it's hard to see much out in this storm, and at this time of night. After a few minutes, I decide to walk back towards my bedroom and lay down again. The warmth of the blankets is welcoming and comforting. Winters are cold out here in the forest and mountains of Washington. The warmth of the blankets makes an old soul like myself not want to get out. If you take me now, God, I'm quite sure I'd never know I died. That's the level of comfort we are speaking of here. Thump, thump, thump. Benjamin goes wild with his barking as I struggle to regain my bearings again. Looking around, I debate if I even want to get up this time. "Quiet, boy," I tell Benjamin. "It's probably just a storm anyhow. Get some rest. We got a long winter and not many places to be, my friend." It is with that, Benjamin and I drift off to sleep. Morning arises, and after much struggle, due to the aforementioned warmth of the blankets, I finally get up, get dressed, and decide to make some breakfast. Nothing quite like bacon, eggs, and hash browns to start the morning right. I'm pretty far out in the woods, but we do live close enough to a town that is only about an hour to an hour and a half away during the fall, and I stock up on plenty of food to go with meat I hunt as well. If there's one way I swear to never leave this earth, it's through starving. My gut is proof of that, I tell you what. I start up some coffee and decide to go out and survey how much snow has fallen since last night. According to the forecast, we were to have a slight lull during the day before snow impacts us hard again tonight. Looking around, I see I'll have to do some shoveling and clearing out around the cabin, but I figure I can do that after I get some food in me. I turn around and see Benjamin, who just finished his business, run up to me excitedly, tail wagging like the first day I pulled him from his mother, when he was just a wee little pup. Now, he's a huge Saint Bernard, and my most loyal and devoted friend. His mother passed a few years back, sadly, and the dog that impregnated her never really stuck around. I pet Benjamin, and as I do, I look over at the cabin. That's when I notice something odd. There appears to be some damage to my door. Walking over to examine the door more closely, it seems there are some broken and chipped pieces of wood and a bit of indentation. That's strange. Could the storm have done this? I think on it for a moment, but decide ultimately I'll add reinforcing and repairing to my door to my to-do list, and for the day, move back inside with Benjamin to check on breakfast and the coffee that goes with it. Shutting the door behind us, I finish making my coffee a bit longer. Nothing quite like hot coffee on a cold winter morning. I drink it straight. It reminds me of living in a way. It can be bitter, but it's beautiful ultimately. Once I finish my coffee, I take the time to clean everything up, do my dishes, and then spend much of the rest of my day shoveling snow and repairing and reinforcing my door. I take breaks for the bathroom and to make and eat lunch, but by the time I'm through with it all, the sun is beginning to set, so I move inside, lock and bar the door behind me, and start up dinner. I'm cooking up some deer sausage from a kill I made a bit back. I figure deer sausage with some rice and beans isn't that bad. By the time I'm through, I can barely move from all the food I've eaten. Looking over at Benjamin, I see he seems quite content as well. I take him outside to go to the bathroom before locking up for the night. Turning off all the lights, I then head back to where it takes no time at all for the world to disappear around me. Thump, thump, thump. Thump, thump, thump. What the hell is that? Slowly, I force myself up before turning on some lights and heading for the noise. To my shock, the barricade on the door is cracked. The barricade is only made of wood, but it's a large piece of lumber. I make a point to add getting a metal bar for the barricade on my to-do list for tomorrow. There isn't any thumping at this point, but it's clear someone or something is trying to get inside my home. I grab my rifle, just in case, and peek through the windows. There doesn't appear to be anything. Granted, my windows aren't large enough for anyone to fit through. They're so small, I'm not so worried about any real sort of threat getting inside that way. The best way is through the front door, and something seems like it wants in. The rest of the night I sit in my chair, covered up, my rifle next to me, and pass out as best as I can. When I awake, it's morning. I'm guessing there was no more thumping, or maybe I was too tired to notice. I prep breakfast before taking the large piece of wood I slid in its slot as the barricade off and opened the door. I can't explain what I saw. My door is somewhat broken, and I decide I'll head to town today and get a proper barricade. Maybe even a steel door of some kind, after I take care of the snow. It isn't supposed to snow again until tomorrow, so I do just that. Most of my day is spent getting much of the heavier door and replacing the frame and barricade. The door I have is steel, but it is painted in such a way to match the look of the cabin. It isn't perfect, but it'll do and be far more secure. By the time I get home, I have just enough time to fix the door, replace the frame, and set it all up with my new barricade before making dinner and taking Benjamin out for his nightly business. As soon as that's over, I head straight to bed, barricading my door before I do. We'll get some sleep tonight, Benjamin. One way or another. We'll get some damn sleep because nothing is getting through that door. It is with that I pass out, blissfully unaware of the world around me. The next morning I awoke well rested and surprised to find I wasn't awoken by any real noise or banging on my door. Perhaps whatever animal had been doing it simply gave up after the first couple of nights. I did my normal routine of breakfast and soon after took Benjamin out for a walk after locking up. I let him do his business and we played a bit, enjoying the solitude and the beautiful view as we did. It was nice out here. Occasionally you'd get some wild animal aggressively trying to get into your home, but they were usually just hungry and often didn't pose a real threat. Sure, you get stories of people who come from their homes or wherever and there's like a boar or a bear or something that broke in and raided their fridge, but more often than not those people survive and don't experience such a thing again. At worst, they fix their doors, maybe get a weapon for it, and usually, that is that. They live the rest of their lives in peace. I don't really blame an animal for wanting food, but generally, you aren't going to see a bear wandering around in winter. So I'm a bit perplexed in some manner as to what was big enough to mess up my previous door. I don't dwell on this though, cause it might just freak me out. I just continue to play with Benjamin for the rest of the day. We head back in that evening on account of the fact that it's supposed to snow again, and tonight a winter storm is supposed to be here, and probably will be here for the next week or so. I figure that'll mean a lot of shoveling on my part, but I'm more than prepared for winter out here, seeing as I've been out here for most of my life. It's hard to believe I used to dwell more in the city when I was younger. I eventually got tired of that and society and decided to move out here around 25. Now, I'm 45 and well versed in living in the wilderness. My only regret is that I didn't take to doing this sooner. Life is peaceful out here, for the most part, I think to myself. It's quite nice and you'll never have any real problems with people here. Walking inside my cabin, I lock up and barricade my door before making some dinner for myself and feeding Benjamin as well. I stay up after doing dishes and watching some television before finally turning out the lights around 10 and heading to bed. Thump, thump, thump. Benjamin, I think we have a guest again. What do you say we greet him? Benjamin shoots up already on edge from the thumping at the door as I grab my rifle and head out towards the living room. I still don't see anything through my windows, and so I look out my peephole. It's dark and there doesn't appear to be anything there. As soon as I said that, I saw a large eye that took me by surprise and made me jump back for a minute. This was followed by another loud and persistent thumping on my door. Once I got over the initial surprise, I pounded back on my door, rifle in hand, and getting tired of being awoken in the middle of the night. I addressed whatever animal was out there. Listen here. I am tired and cranky, and I'm sick of waking up in the middle of the night. You can bang all you want, but you won't be getting through my door. There was a silence for a moment, and Benjamin was on edge as he waited to hear something back. After a few minutes, we thought maybe we'd scared the thing off. Still, to be safe, I waited for another hour. Nothing. Finally, we went back to bed and I passed out again. I shot up and ran for the door at the sound of a smashing and truck alarm blaring. I looked out the window, but couldn't see well through the snow. A few seconds go by when I suddenly see my truck flying towards the side of my cabin. I fell back before the truck impacted the side of the cabin. The cabin shook and Benjamin barked like mad as I scrambled to my feet and saw pieces of glass from my windows on the floor now. Holding up my rifle, I looked through the scope but saw nothing. I wanted to go out, but decided it was for the best not to. Whatever had destroyed my truck threw it with enough force that it hit the side of my cabin. I'd never encountered any sort of animal that could do such a thing. Based on the eye that I saw, I'd say whatever was out there couldn't be human at all. I quickly pulled out my phone and began dialing the cops. I was on the line when I heard a loud howling of some kind. The dispatch asked where I lived and what was happening, and all I could muster up was the courage to say to get over here, giving them my address along with that message, before hanging up. It took a few hours, but soon the sheriff arrived and knocked on my door. He asked what in the hell had happened, and I explained to him everything from the past few nights leading up to this moment. Perplexed, he had looked around and told me to stay put. I waited, rifle in hand, for his return. After a half hour or so, he returned and informed me that he wasn't sure what the hell was going on, but he'd take a report and come back in the morning when he could see better to check things out. He informed me that I should lock and barricade my door, and if I hear anything else out of the ordinary to call him. He then handed me a card with his number on it, and soon after left. I didn't sleep the remainder of the night, but I also never heard anything else outside either. Morning finally came, and true to his word, the sheriff returned and we both looked around the place more thoroughly. It was snowing like crazy and we didn't really find much. The sheriff reassured me, saying it's likely the snow covered up any tracks that was made, and that I should think about putting up some sort of security system or maybe some cameras that snap pictures at the first sign of movement. I agreed and soon after departed from the cabin. I spent the rest of the day making calls to my insurance company and arguing about how I had no clue what destroyed my truck. I also made some repairs to the side of my cabin, and after having my truck towed away, I soon pulled my four-wheeler out of the shed and headed to get some cameras. By the time I returned, the night was coming fast, so I installed and tested my cameras before having Benjamin go to the bathroom, and then I locked up my ATV in my shed and went inside my cabin. I made dinner and tried to relax as best as I could, but I was quite shaken from the previous night's events. I kept my rifle close to me at all times because now I was occasionally peeking out my peephole. I saw nothing and I barricaded my windows at this point in an attempt to keep the snow out. The night was long and very little sound had me up, checking my door every time. I was tired, but I couldn't bring myself to sleep just yet. I was sure whatever was out there would be back. If not tonight, tomorrow night. If not then, at some point down the road for sure. Sure as shit, I started to doze off when I heard a loud thumping at my door. I got up and slammed back once again. "Go away! If you don't, I'll shoot you myself!" There was a howling, followed by an even louder thud as I felt my floor shake. I held my rifle up at the door and waited as I heard two more thuds. This was followed by a loud howling before everything went silent again. The thought crossed my mind to call the sheriff again, but as things had fallen silent, I decided not to. I was scared for sure, but the thing had been able to get through my door yet, so I didn't feel like I needed to call him immediately. I wasn't in immediate danger just yet as long as that store stayed strong. It was about 4 in the morning, and so I made some coffee and waited for Benjamin for daylight to come. Once the sun crested over the mountains, and it was bright enough, I unlocked my door and headed out with Benjamin to check out my door, also the cameras. The door seemed well, aside from an indentation. The frame seemed undamaged, and as such, I decided to immediately check the cameras next. Looking over the film, I was distraught. There were photos of something big. It looked about 9 feet tall, and had been throwing its shoulder into my door before leaving last night. I was in shock at the sight of this creature as it stood on 2 legs. But my cameras didn't get a good enough picture of it to tell what it really was. Walking in the direction of the creature, I tried to follow the tracks, but I was at a loss. So I decided to head back to town on my four-wheeler and pick up some more cameras for the cabin itself, and soon after returned, setting them up in places where I would get a much better view of the thing if I returned. After installing the cameras, I worked on the repairs to the side of my cabin some more. It was coming along slowly, but it was definitely coming along well. Once again, night came. Benjamin and I headed inside, and I made some dinner for us both. After locking and barricading the door behind me, I hoped tonight, by some miracle of God himself, I'd hopefully get some real rest. To my surprise, I did just that. After heading to bed, I didn't hear a sound outside except for the snow. Once morning came, I felt refreshed and a little bit better. I received a call from the sheriff, who I informed I was okay still, before explaining I had done as he'd said with the cameras. I told him I caught something I didn't know how to explain on my cameras before having him over and showing him the photos myself. The sheriff suggested something odd to me. He said he didn't normally jump to such far-fetched conclusions, but he thought there was a chance it could be a Bigfoot. I laughed at the sheriff at first before I noticed he wasn't laughing at all. "You can't be serious, right, Sheriff?" The sheriff nodded at me, quite seriously, before telling me he'd seen some strange things in his time, and out in the woods of Washington, he'd investigated other claims of strange happenings in his long career. He said they'd gone unexplained, but he'd seen tracks before and he was convinced Bigfoot existed. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't this time. Well, what the hell am I supposed to do about this if you are right, Sheriff? He shook his head, unsure of what to say before putting his hand on my shoulders and telling me to install those other cameras, double-check my locks and reinforcements, and keep my gun close just in case. He left me with the words, "If this thing is aggressive as it seems, I'd need all the help I could get." He offered to stick around for the night, and I almost declined before thinking, I'd be better safe rather than sorry, right? The next couple of nights went by quickly. I slept and not a thing had happened. It didn't return. It was nearing the end of the week and the snow was finally beginning to let up, and when I shook the sheriff's hand and told him thank you before he finally went on his own way, he said if anything happened again, feel free to call him, and he'd head this way. We'd work on the cabin over the past couple of days, and had just about fully repaired the side, and we almost replaced the windows. I was feeling slightly more relaxed as I hadn't seen the creature in about 3 nights or so. That relaxation lasted as long as it took me to check the cameras. It seemed the last few nights, the sheriff and I had not been alone as we believed ourselves to be. On the cameras, I saw the thing still not very clearly several times. In some of the photos, it simply sat and waited, observing the cabin. In others, it looked inside the windows of the sheriff's vehicle before slinking back into the trees, waiting. At one point, a time for which I'm sure we're both still awake and talking, you could see the creature listening in, its ears pressed to the door. I never got a completely clear shot, however, and so I didn't have definitive proof of what it looked like. My first thought was to call the sheriff back, but upon further reflection, I decided against it. This thing was intelligent. It was waiting for me to be alone again. It knew I wasn't, so it didn't attack any of those nights. If I was going to lure it out again, and at the very least get a better shot of it, I need to stay alone until it came out to see me. So that's what I did. I made a real meal, and soon hit the bed early. I waited quietly, hoping to hear the thing again. I had locked my door and barricaded my camera. I made sure it was running. I was prepared to find proof of the thing that stalked me. I had a feeling I'd do just that. With enough patience, at some point late in the night, I must have drifted off because before I knew it, the morning was upon me again. Waking up, I went to the kitchen to make breakfast and noticed it was still snowing. I checked the weather, which seemed to indicate there was another system that had developed overnight and had heavier snowfall, and that we would be stuck here in the snow longer than anticipated. Thinking nothing of this, I ate breakfast and headed out to check the cameras with Benjamin happily running alongside me. It was only now I realized a problem. The cameras were no longer there. I found them destroyed, all over the yard. Any film I recovered only showed black or nothing on it at all but snow. It was almost as if this thing had spotted the cameras, avoided them, and soon after destroyed them one by one, leaving the husk of the cameras behind as a message. That's not what happened though, right? I mean, there's no way that Bigfoot or whatever the hell this thing is was that intelligent, right? I tried to shake off the thought before going inside and calling the sheriff. It didn't take long for him to arrive and we discussed what had happened. "I'm at a loss, Sheriff. I'm not sure what to do now. If I get more cameras, this thing might just destroy them again. I mean, I don't know if it can climb, or what it can do, or what it's capable of, or what it's not incapable of. If I have you or anyone stay nearby, it likely won't show up again. You can't stick around forever, though. What do you think?" The sheriff seemed every bit amiss at a loss as I was. He was confused and unsure of what to try next, but he agreed. Getting another camera would likely be a waste of money. Perplexed by the intelligence of this thing, the sheriff said to call him if I noticed anything else odd or if the thing attacked again. Soon after he drove away, looking every bit as confused as I felt. What was I going to do? There was no way I could simply ignore this thing. There was no way I could do anything to catch it in the act. I had never felt so hopeless in my entire life as I did at this point in time. Deciding not to get too down on myself, as it wouldn't help my situation anyways, I went about my day shoveling snow and chopping some firewood before ending the day playing with Benjamin and trying to stay relaxed. I knew panicking wasn't going to help me or anything, and at this point, I need all my wits about me every night until this was over. Locking things up, I ate some dinner and spent the rest of the night watching some movies and trying to relax as much as possible. To my surprise, I awoke to find it was 9 in the morning. I'd woken much later than usual and found Benjamin licking me and trying to get me outside probably so he could go to the bathroom. I got up and let Benjamin do his business before looking around the property. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until I checked my shed. The lock had been broken off and my four-wheeler was missing. Shit, I thought to myself. This thing wanted me stranded completely. I wasn't too worried. I had plenty of food to make it through the winter, but the thought that I was stranded did leave me with some sense of unease. I searched for my vehicle for quite some time before finally finding it an hour away, wrapped around a tree, down a steep drop-off. Heading back home, I called the sheriff and explained to him what had happened. I insisted he didn't stick around, however, as the only way this Bigfoot was going to show itself, if that even what it was if I was alone. With no more than my dog. He said he wouldn't stay, but I need to show him where my four-wheeler was found. So I did, and the remainder of my day was spent with him examining the damage and making a report before leaving. This was insane, I thought to myself, when I finally settled in for the night at my cabin. I had an uneasy feeling as I went to bed. Something didn't feel right about tonight. It wasn't just that this thing was slowly making moves to isolate me. It was also that it seemed to know I had nowhere else to go. It was as though it had chosen me off of the basis that it knew I didn't have anyone else to stay with or live with. How long had this thing been watching me? Had it been days, weeks, months? I hesitated to think the last part, but had it been years? Whatever the case may be, it knew exactly when to come out so it wouldn't be seen. It was highly intelligent, and I was out of options other than to wait for it to try to enter my home again and deal with it accordingly. I pondered what I'd do if that happened until, finally, I drifted off to sleep. Thump, 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 thump. The banging was louder than ever, and I shot up out of bed. Running for my phone, I immediately called the sheriff. The phone rang as I did. I could see the steel bending on my barricade. Hello? Sawyer? Are you there, Sawyer? Sawyer, is that your dog? Sawyer?
Update. It was in half an hour or so before I arrived at the cabin. There was blood and the sight of a mangled steel door on the floor. Looking around, I noticed the foam was ripped out of the wall and in pieces. Walking further into the cabin, the lights were dead and it was in the back room. Amongst other destroyed doors, I found Sawyer, gun clutched to his chest, terrified. It took a bit of persuasion, but I finally got Sawyer to hand me the gun, and I soon called up the crime scene and brought him down to the station. After giving him some cocoa and giving him some time to come down from the shock, he explained to me that he awoke to the sound of violent banging. He then explained how he tried to call me, but as soon as he dialed, his door was beginning to give away, so he headed for it. After much struggling, he backed off when he realized the door was going to fall. He didn't want to be crushed by it, so as soon as the thing entered his home, his dog Benjamin jumped at it, and bit at it before being thrown off, getting up and barking again. He said he emptied every bullet he had into the thing as it ripped the phone out of the wall and crushed it. I stopped Sawyer and asked if he killed the thing. He said he grabbed the gun. He had his backup in his case and emptied every shell he could into it, but it only howled, turned away, and ran off into the night. Sawyer seemed quite convinced the stalker was alive and well. We staged a few more stakeouts and I left him alone, per his wishes, for several nights after. Nights turned into weeks, which turned into months, and there was never a word or another harassment from this thing again. Sawyer and I became friends, bonded by our involvement in this case. He still says he has PTSD to this day from the events. But since repaired his cabin, completely lives alone and in the same spot. Although he fears his attacker, he refuses to move. We are still friends to this day.
Dan. I hear my wife's voice in dreams most nights, but lately, I've been hearing it when I wake as well. My wife went missing about 4 years ago, but I'm firmly convinced she is dead. No one could find her, from the rangers to the police to me. No one knows what happened to her. I'm convinced something killed her in these woods. I've made my home here most of my life. My wife joined me shortly after we married. She was more than capable hunter, and so I figure whatever got her couldn't have been anything less than capable itself. I'm inclined to believe it was more or less a he or a she. The woods in Minnesota are a lonely place during the winter. My wife was out on a morning hunt shortly before she went missing. It's a strange feeling when someone you love vanishes from your life like that. It's all at once infuriating and crushingly depressing. The lack of closure, that is what hurts the most about it in my opinion. Now, I have nightmares about her. The thoughts inside my mind creating a story of some horrific end that changes every night that I dream. The worst part of it all is waking to her voice. I always hear it at the end of the dreams, and I hear it again upon waking. I know it isn't her, and I know something out there wants me to believe it is her. Sitting up, I realize dawn is approaching. I was awoken at some point last night to the sound of screaming from the forest. I'm not suicidal enough to investigate something like that in the middle of the snowy night. Yet. Once the sun rises, I'm going to head out and check another cabin not terribly far from here. A neighbor, if you can call them that being the distance, lives there. Her name is Loretta, and she was there for when my wife disappeared. I'll be damned if I don't at least investigate the screams I heard. I spent the rest of the darkness cleaning my guns and prepping them by candlelight. I like a simpler life, and I don't need to have electricity or any of that. I know the forest like the back of my hand, and as soon as daylight completely breaks, I head out into the snowy forest to investigate. It's a 3-mile hike east before I finally arrive at my destination. You can imagine this takes quite some time normally, but twice as long in the deep snow. Upon my arrival, I began pounding on the door. Loretta, you in there? I hear nothing. I give the door another knock, but upon hearing nothing, I announce my intention, in case she just didn't hear me, and kick the door in. I asked her not to shoot. It doesn't take long to get in. When I do, I fall back in shock. There's blood everywhere. It looks like a few shots were fired off. There is no sign of a body. Judging by the blood, however, it doesn't look good. Fuck, I think to myself. What the hell could have happened here? Examining things more closely, it seems to me she was mauled by some sort of animal. The only problem being, outside of my own forced entry, the cabin was locked, and it doesn't look like anyone or anything forced their way inside. I looked even closer, and saw some shredded shirt cloth with a shotgun on the floor with a deep claw mark in the stock. Judging by the bleeding, things looked even closer, and worse, for Loretta. Why would she be missing if whatever attacked her didn't already win the fight? I took a deep breath and looked for any sign of trail or anything. It appeared some blood led to the door, but after that, all traces ended. I figured the snow was the likely culprit for the missing trail. It snows heavily and often this time of year. It wouldn't take any time for that blood trail to be soaked or otherwise vanish. I kicked myself at the thought that I could have tried to come last night. This was soon followed by the sobering realization that I could have been killed if I had come out here. A 3-mile hike in the middle of a snowstorm and a forest just wasn't practical, even from someone who spent most of their life out here. Pushing any further regret from my mind, I decided to look around outside. Examining the outside of the cabin wasn't proving very worth. However, as the snow had covered everything, there were no leads, only a missing body lost in a bloody brawl. I've seen some strange shit around here, but who or what could have gotten into a cabin without forcing a lock and then disappearing without a trace? I'm no detective, but we all lock our doors at night. I even go a step further and built a system that allows me to put a piece of welded metal behind my already locked door, just in case. It's simple, but it's never failed me. With no leads, I look around the forest. The snow is falling more lightly than last night, but it's still snowing as I decided to head further east. Maybe I'll find something that will give me more of a clue further ahead. As I walk deeper into the forest, I pull out some homemade jerky and eat, looking around to try to find something that catches my eye. In the brush, a few feet away, I see a set of eyes. Slowly, I walk towards them, but as I get closer they disappear. Probably an animal, I think to myself, as I continue to eat and walk. I laugh as I ponder in the woods. They might be just getting to me a bit. If you live out here in solitude long enough, you'll start to hear things or see things that aren't there. Sometimes your mind will make things bigger than what they are. Shaking off any hesitation, I continue forwards, having put away the jerky I was eating. I headed in the direction of the eyes in case there was a future meal to be had. Although, I could go into town, which is many miles away I might add. I generally find it better to just hunt for my own food. That's life out here, and how we've basically sworn off society. Stepping through the brush, I don't see any animal, but I do find some curious looking tracks. Looking down, I see a track about 3 feet in length, and with what appears to be a single toe. Looking through the trees, I follow the tracks until I begin to notice blood again. The blood appears to grow more prevalent the further I travel until I finally push my way through some bushes. On the other side of the bushes, I freeze in place, looking at a tree. I see what can only be Loretta. I identify her by what's left of her tattered clothing on her shredded corpse. What could have done this, I think to myself. Poor Loretta was only 25, and as kind as a soul there could be. Examining what was left of her body, it is clear that whatever did this was brutal and extremely hungry. Most importantly though, it wasn't human at all. Trying to think of what sort of animal could do this, or what even could get her out here in a manner like this must have been... I don't know, I'm at a loss. The tracks, the body, none of it makes any sense to me. I don't have long to ponder this though, as suddenly a loud shriek comes from somewhere in the forest. I'm terrified, as it's the most inhuman and unnerving sound I've ever heard in my life. I try to mentally smack myself and regain my senses as I turn my head and back for my cabin. I'm miles away and shaking as I run. Hours later, just before dark, I arrive at my cabin. I was going to drive into town, but to my shock, my truck has been destroyed. The hood is missing and it's smoking. The tires are destroyed. It is clear something doesn't want me to leave. Terrified, I run to my cabin, locking the door behind me and barring it. I try to take a moment to calm myself and breathe, but it only ends up in me vomiting on the floor. I walk over to my bed, trying to process what is happening. I soon get up, pour some whiskey into a flask and take a swig. I shut the flask, shakily, and breathe. I made sure. A swig was all I took because I wanted something to calm my nerves, not make myself unaware of my surroundings. After I calm a bit, I try to think about what could have killed Loretta, and how the hell it was going to get out of these woods safely. It is evident that whatever is out there could have probably killed me already, since it somehow gotten ahead of me and disabled my only means of getting anywhere in a timely manner. Loretta was torn to shreds. Then it hits me, a despair at the thought of the same thing that killed Loretta could kill my wife. I tried not to think further on this as I refocused my mind on what I should do next. I kept my gun close, lit a fire in the fireplace, and sat there shaking till I finally drifted off. Another nightmare, this one of my wife being torn to shreds. I feel hopeless as I watch her being torn to shreds, screaming in agony. Then like that, I hear her voice. She's screaming for me to help, but I can do nothing. I awake to the same voice somewhere outside. I regain my wits long enough to realize where I am. There's no way in hell I'm going to answer that call, but at the same time, I feel my soul being crushed at the sound of her voice. Is that what this thing wants? Is it trying to torment me? I cry myself to sleep again, and upon waking, I realize it's daytime again. I debate going outside, but upon opening the door I notice there is a blizzard going. Snow and ice, the likes of which I've never seen before, are pouring in droves as the wind screams at me. I force the door shut again, relocking and barring it, and sitting down and making breakfast. It's clear I'm not going anywhere today, I think to myself. I think on things and try to get some more sleep. For the remainder of the day, I just try to shut my eyes, but every time I do, I hear my wife scream. I ultimately wind up drinking myself to sleep. When I wake up, it is night and the storm appears to have died down a bit. I'm about to get up when I see the knob on the door turning. To my shock, the door is unlocked. Did I do that? No, there's no way, I think to myself. If I hadn't also created the bar lock behind that, whatever's out there would have been in here by now. The thought hits me with dread as I rush over and relock the door. I hear a ferocious pounding on the door, a violent banging that lasts 3 or more knocks, before everything just falls quiet again. I'm trapped, alone, and with no way to contact anyone. We don't exactly have cell phones or towers out here, this deep into the woods. Thinking on that, however, I somewhat laugh. Perhaps I should have embraced some things about society, I think. If I survive this, I will for sure, I think to myself again. Yes, if I survive, I laughed aloud. As I laugh, I realize that a bit of insanity seems to be taking hold of my mind. No, I need to stop drinking and keep my wits about me. I start up another fire and do some cooking. Deer meat never tasted so good. Food itself never tasted so good. Being alive is something I never thought I took for granted, until now. As I'm eating, however, the delicious smell of the meat I've cooked quickly disappears as something far more nauseating catches my nose. I smell decay, and rotting meat that is so powerful I feel dizzy. Dan, help me, Dan. My wife's voice seems to sing from outside, almost as though the wind itself were speaking in her voice. I feel dizzy from the smell and sick from both the smell and the depressing sound of my wife's voice. Leave me the fuck alone. Why do you torment me? There is silence for a moment as I reach for my gun and pray. Then I'm shaking at the sound of glass shattering and a thud of Loretta's body now laying next to me. Terrified, I fire off a few shots into the night, but this is only met by the terror-inducing shriek and then the storm outside picking up again. My fire dies and I sit for hours shaking, cold and terrified, with my gun aimed at the window. The rest of the night is just snow falling. Nothing tormenting me. No shrieks, howls, or voices from my wife. As daylight approaches, I realize I haven't blinked for what seems like hours. I spend much of the day barricading the area with the broken window and fortifying any areas of the cabin. It is soon after this that I drag Loretta's body out and bury it. I figure I could tell the police everything if I survive, but then again, I probably won't because it is doubtful that they'd believe a word I had to say. It isn't long after burying Loretta that I realize the sun is setting and I haven't eaten. So I head inside, locking and barring my door and adding a few other reinforcements on the door and 2 extra ways to bar it. I didn't want to let anything through the door. Cooking up a meal, it didn't take long before the stench of decay reached my nose again. I knew what it was at this point. It was the smell of the thing that taunted me. It was waiting outside as it did. I sat in here, trying to eat through the stench and cowering like a baby. The truth is, I wanted to go out and attack it, but I did not see it yet. I did not know what I was getting into. Judging by what it did to Loretta, and some of the things I'd seen thus far, it was clear a direct approach wouldn't be wise till I knew more about it. Two things were clear about this. It was intelligent, and it was vicious. Struggling to stomach the rest of my meal, I finished it and eventually collapsed to sleep at an unknown time of the night. Waking up the next day, I realized quickly the storm was raging stronger than ever before. Something didn't seem right about that, though. It was the dead of winter, and it snowed quite a bit, but the way the storm raged, it was as though something was controlling it. I tried not to think about it and ate some more. I was trying to ration what I had. I was beginning to see my food stock dwindling. A thought crossed my mind that perhaps the thing was purposely keeping me from leaving. Was it trying to starve me to death? I laughed for a moment, but the laughing ceased when I heard another banging at the door. Leaping up, I headed for the door slowly, gun in hand. Looking through the peephole, however, I saw nothing. Did I actually hear that sound? I had to, I thought. It was way too loud, right? I was growing exhausted and tired from the psychological torment I had been experiencing. Thoughts ran through my head about possibly making a suicidal run for it. They were immediately shot down by the ever-dwindling logical rationale inside my head that reminded me that suicide would not be a good answer. I needed to keep my wits about me. If I needed to go out, I needed to do only in the most desperate of situations. Day bled into night, and night bled into day. Eventually, I began to lose all sense of time. Every noise made me jumpy, and every sound made me shake. I was beginning to lose my mind in such a way that I was beginning to lose food. I began equating the loss of food with the loss of sanity. Some nights were quiet, others were much louder. The storm raged on, and it was becoming apparent that it wasn't a natural storm. Some nights, I'd hear slow clawing at the doorway, or shrieks from the forest. I'd consistently hear my wife's voice asking for help, at least once every night. I know the thing had to know I knew better. I believe it did know I knew better, and I do think it knew that I knew it wasn't my wife, and yet it continued to do so. No doubt a psychological weapon being used against me to wear me down that much more mentally. When daylight comes, I find myself going out only long enough to remove snow from around my cabin, so it's not buried alive. It's extremely cold and I'm half delirious as I'm almost out of food now. I thought I heard a voice, but that'd be crazy, right? Finishing shoveling, I shut, lock, and bar the door again. I take no more than 2 steps before hearing a knock again. Looking through the peephole, I see nothing. Stepping away, I hear a knocking again. I hear a voice, and it sounds like a man, but I'm not sure. Opening the door, I see nothing but snow. There is no one there, and I find myself partially wanting to tear my hair out from the grief I feel inside. The desperation is making me grow uneasy, and I'm beginning to see things that aren't there. Hours later, night sets in. The story picks up again. I find myself nibbling on the last of the food as I hear my wife's voice begging for help again. She's crying and I'm also crying. I'm not sure what is happening anymore. I'm becoming less and less able to decipher reality from insanity. I have noticed that the harassing noises are becoming less frequent. The next day or two are completely quiet. I'm too weak to make it anywhere at this point, and I'm starving. Every single time I stand, I feel sick and dizzy. My legs shake and I'm weary. Is this it? Is this the end? A pounding rings out at the door, and I slowly walk towards the door. I look at the peephole. To my shock and horror, I see an emaciated ribcage. But inside is what looks like my wife's face. No. That's fucking impossible. I collapse to the floor before long. I feel the world spinning. Things grow dark, and in what feels like the blink of an eye, I feel myself laying there, listening to a noise outside. Just come in and kill me, I think. Just finish me the fuck off. Please, just do it. I continue to think. I feel the most desperate I've ever felt in my life, and before I know it, I'm contemplating the thought of going out into the woods and walking till I'm eaten or I collapse and freeze to death. Yes, this seems like the way. Just end it all. Unbarring the door, unlocking it, and delirious, I open the door, and to my shock, I see the body of this beast before me. It is huge, emaciated, and smells like death. It has a deer skull for a head, large eyes, and is dripping with fresh blood. In shock at the sight of the creature, I pull out my gun, threatening to fire. I guess I care more about my life than I realize, I think. It was mostly a reaction when I fired, but upon firing was the world seemed to snap to reality. Was I sleeping? Was I dreaming? And then, the reality of my situation unfolded before my eyes. Standing before me, bleeding, a spray of holes in his chest was a man. I believe he was trying to ask why as he collapsed to the floor before me and panicked and desperate. I dragged him inside, locking the door and barring it again. No. This isn't fucking happening. This isn't happening. What was this even? Had I just killed a man mid-sleep? Was I that hungry, terrified, and mad at this point? No. I thought to myself, this couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. The thought crossed my mind for a moment that I would need to hide the body in case anyone came looking for the man. This thought lasted a moment before another thought crossed my mind. A much darker thought had crossed my mind. Something so sick and disgusting that I hesitated at first. I found myself moving into a corner away from the body now as I thought. I was out of food, I was running out of time, and I needed to eat. A war had ignited in my head. My mind was debating on what to do. My stomach and body told me exactly what I needed to do in order to survive. My mind, or what was left of it, however, said something different. If I ate some of this man, even just a little, it might be what I needed to survive. Given enough time, though, with proper storage and handling, I could regain my strength. Yes, I could live. Another voice inside me was telling me no, it wasn't right. But my body and some other part of my mind was rationalizing it all. You're in a desperate situation. You need to eat to survive. If you regain your strength, perhaps you can get out of this place. I'm sure the police would understand, right? I felt the no's disappearing from my mind, and the yes seemed far more appealing to most of my mind and all of my body. Slowly forcing myself up, I found myself with some tools in my hand, a saw, and some other cutlery needed. The remainder of my night was filled with the sound of my wife asking for help, the sight of me cutting this innocent man's body up. I needed to survive. I thought with a gleeful smile as I cut into the man's meat and prepped him. That's what this was all about. It was survival. Yes, survival. Much of the rest of the night was a blur of blood, cleaning, cutting, and storing. We were just animals after all. Eating another human is just eating an intelligent animal. If it's for survival purposes, it's okay, I told myself, over and over again. Eventually, I'd finish up all the prep, storage, and cook the part of the human. It was part of his leg, and I tried not to think about it as I bit into the charred meat of the dead man. To my surprise, I liked it. I found it delicious. I didn't debate if that was because it actually tasted great, or I was just happy to eat. Looking in the cabinet, I pulled out some seasoning and found it, made it much more delicious. A little hot sauce never hurt any meat either. I felt my stomach thanking me as I bit into the charred meat. I didn't eat much as I hadn't eaten in a bit, and didn't want to vomit my meal up by overindulging. I stored the rest and rested. I heard the snow, I heard the cries, and none of it mattered for a moment as I passed out. In my dreams, I saw my wife in those dreams. I saw her die. The difference this time being I saw from the monster's perspective. It was the strangest thing, I thought to myself. I swear I could taste my wife as the monster fed upon her. The dream seemed not to have an end. I saw it again and again. I could no longer decipher the difference between the monster and myself. I hadn't eaten my wife in reality, obviously, but I had eaten someone to survive. In some ways, I immediately felt sorry for this creature as it fed. No matter how much it ate, it only grew hungrier. I awoke from the nightmare, angry and insatiably hungry. I immediately pulled out more meat and cooked it. Before tearing into it, I no longer knew if it was day or night. I didn't hear banging, nor did I hear shrieks of the voice of my wife. I needed to eat. This is all that mattered as I felt hot and hungry. I'd eaten, but upon finishing the food, hunger consumed me again. I cooked and ate some more. Eventually I grew tired and passed out from all the food I consumed. I found myself hungry in what felt like another dream. I saw myself through the eyes of the creature, eating viciously. What little sanity I had left was vanishing from within. I wanted to taste the flesh of more humans. Yes, I thought more humans will sate my hunger pains. I probably need to hunt some more if I hope to live. I awoke to find I was holding pieces of raw meat from the man I'd murdered. Cold chunks of meat were between my teeth and I gashed away. So good, I thought. I'm going to need to hunt more, yes. I unbarred the door and unlocked it, and was surprised to find a wall of snow and ice upon opening it. I tried breaking through some of it, but nothing worked. How long had I been here, I thought. The reality of the fact is I was trapped and was stuck. I couldn't break through, and I think I might have lost my mind more because of it. The reality of the fact that I was trapped in was setting in, but it shoved out of my mind by the need to eat again. I didn't wait to cook, no. That took way too long. I lost all track of time, and I don't know how long I fed, but eventually I ran out of meat. There was no longer a fire going, and I couldn't make another as the snow had covered the chimney and imploded in. I was cold, alone, and worst of all, I was starving. I felt desperation setting in as hours seemed like seconds to me, and seconds seemed like hours to my hunger. I looked at my own arm and thought to myself, I could lose that. Yeah, that'd be okay. Anything to feed again, I thought to myself. I thought about cutting off my arm, but instead, I decided why not waste the time and cook my own flesh. I'll admit it hurt at first. Tasting my own blood was somewhat pleasant though, as I also tasted the raw meat of my own flesh. I ignored the hair and the flesh and worked my way slowly to what I believe was the bone. At one point, before feeling weak, probably from blood loss, the world was cold. Now, it was pleasant though, and soon I felt everything going black. I drifted off into a cold abyss, dreaming only of my next feast as I did. Sometime later. Shocking news today as a park ranger and police officer are found dead. Police and park authorities were on the lookout for a man reported missing not long ago, when they were two of the members that were sent out from the organization. They were both found dead with their faces partially ripped off. Local authorities following up on things when the officer hadn't been heard from shortly after reporting he was about to investigate a cavity found out in the forest. It was then the two bodies were found, and upon further search, a third body was also found. A body belonging to Loretta Kingston was found buried in the front of the property. The owner of the property, Danielle Slag, is currently missing. Police and park authorities ask anyone with information on his whereabouts to please report the information to the local authorities immediately.